Hey everyone, Joey here. In this video, I'm going to help you completely set up your Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro with emulators, ROMs, a front end, and basically anything and everything you need for the most popular emulators. So let's just jump in. First, let's start with preparation, and you can do this without even having the device. So save some time. Since the device only has 128 gigs of internal storage, most people are going to want to buy an SD card, and I would recommend at the very least a 512GB one for what the RP4 can play. I'm using a 1TB personally, and I'll have links in the description to both cards I recommend, as well as an SD card reader because you'll need one. Connect your SD card to your PC, and let's go ahead and right-click it in Windows and click Format. Now format it as exFAT. Choose default allocation size, and also rename it to RP4 if you want. The name can actually be anything. Click Start when you're ready. Now you have a blank SD card that can just be put into the RP4. But let's go ahead and put your ROMs on it first. Retroid doesn't sell devices with ROMs, which is actually a good thing. Now, for obvious reasons, I can't do the whole here's where ROMs are. However, I do show you it in a different video, which I'm going to leave in the description. I don't want anybody asking for ROMs or BIOS files because if you watch that video, it shows you everything. Once you have some ROMs, come back here and you can just create a folder called ROMs. Inside that folder, go ahead and create folder names for any systems that you want. The names don't actually matter. For example, here's N64 for Nintendo 64, GBA for Game Boy Advance, GC for GameCube, and so on, whatever you want to name them. Then inside each folder, put your ROMs. Super easy. When you get your device, you can insert the SD card into the RP4, and it'll ask you to set it up. You want to choose portable storage. Never choose internal storage. Once that's done, if you jump into the Files app in Android, you'll be able to see your SD card and a whole bunch of new folders that Android added. Plus, you have the ROMs folder that we created. To give you an idea of what my SD card looks like, here's mine with my ROMs folder. And inside of it is all of my system folders, and inside of that is all of my ROMs. Easy stuff here, and that's all we really need to do to prep. And it's exactly what you want to do before you get the device. When you actually get your device, if you want to transfer ROMs to it without taking the SD card out, you can connect it via USB-C to your PC, and a pop-up shows up, and you just click Enable File Transfer, and you'll now see your internal storage, as well as your SD card as drives that you can transfer to in Windows. Next up, the RP4 has arrived, and let's go ahead through the first setup. The setup wizard should be fairly easy for anyone to just go through. So just move through the prompts and connect to Wi-Fi and do what it asks until you get to the spot where it asks which emulators to install. Make sure you're not installing anything and then click Next. Then choose AOSP Launcher on the next page. We'll be installing our own front end with Daijisho and our own emulators, so there's no real reason to use theirs, especially since their emulators are out of date. Once you're at the home screen, if you swipe down from the top, you should see the Android Quick panel with a bunch of options including a brightness slider. I suggest choosing Performance mode and keeping the fan on quiet for the best combination of battery life and performance. Although if you do need that extra performance, you're going to have to jump to High Performance and your battery will suffer. Swipe over and you'll see floating icon is enabled. This allows you to swipe in from the right in any game to pull up the Retroid menu to just see CPU temps, frame rate, button mapping for touchscreen games, and more. If you hate this little white line on the right, then you can just touch the panel here to disable it. Swipe over one more time and I'm going to enable dark theme and also turn off location. Next, click the settings cog bottom right, and now we can change Android settings. For me, I'm heading to sound and vibration, and turning off the little charging sounds, touch sounds, and all of that. This part is personal preference. Next, I'm headed to display, and I'm going to set screen timeout to 30 minutes, because I don't want the screen turning off on me. I'm also going to turn off the screensaver, but again, personal preference. Now scroll down and head to Handheld Settings, which is Retroid specific settings. The only thing I change here is in input and changing L2 and R2 mode to both, which will allow you to use the triggers in Daijisho to navigate with. Head back to Android settings, go to System, and then Updater. Let's check for any updates to the RP4, and I'm up to date, so nothing for me. Back in System, head to Gestures, and I personally want the 3-button navigation at the bottom instead of gestures, so I'm going to enable that instead. Personal preference here once again. Alright, so now let's head to the Play Store and log in with your Google account. And let's do the first emulator, which will be Dolphin official, but the beta build for GameCube and Wii. So search for Dolphin and open the app page. Now, I already have the beta, but on this page, you should see a line or a paragraph that says something like sign up for the beta or enroll for beta, and you want to do that first. Don't skip this step. Trust me, you want the most recent Dolphin, and that's the beta build. Once you enroll, just go ahead and install Dolphin. Open it, allow permissions, and allow usage reporting if you'd like. Now click Add Games, bottom right, and navigate to your GameCube ROMs folder, wherever you have them. Mine are on the SD card as you saw before in the GC folder. Now select the Wii tab and do the same thing for your Wii games. You should see everything just populate. Now head to the Settings cog at the top, Config, General, and we want to enable Save States. Just be aware they're experimental. Head back twice and go to Graphics Settings. Going to pause here. Out of the box, the video backend is OpenGL. However, Vulkan is a good option too. The problem is you can't just set Vulkan for everything, as that'll actually break some games. For example, Mario Kart Double Dash. You'll have to play around with what works better for each game, or just check the compatibility spreadsheet linked in the description to see what the community says is best. You can do per game settings if you push and hold on a game and click Edit Game Settings. But back to General Settings, enable compile shaders before starting. In Enhancements, you can change the internal resolution here. 2x is likely safe for most GameCube games, but you might have to lower this if you're having trouble hitting full speed in some games. If you head to Statistics, you can turn on frame rate and other monitoring items if you'd like. Head back and this time go to GameCube input, and you want to go ahead and map GameCube controls, so just set all of your bindings. Head back again, and this time do the same for Wii. But Wii is a bit more complicated. I'm honestly not the best person for Wii controls, as it just gives me a bit of a headache. But I can help you at least set up the classic controller, which works for most games. Scroll down and change extension to Classic. Now click the Settings cog on the right and map the Classic controller for Wii. Go ahead and jump into any game, and you'll see touchscreen controls on the screen. Click the back button on the actual Retroid, which is at the bottom left, and you'll get a menu pop-up. Go to Overlay Controls, Toggle Controls, and Toggle All. No more touchscreen controls, and we're done with Dolphin. Next up, let's do PS2 emulation with Aether SX2. Head to Chrome and search for Aether SX2 3668. You should see an APK mirror result. Click that, scroll down, and click See Available Downloads. Then click the download arrow on the right. Now scroll down and click Download APK. Allow the pop-ups and then click Open when it's done. You'll get a pop-up about allowing unknown apps. Just go ahead. Open Aether SX2, click Next, Next, Next again, and now you need to import your PS2 BIOS file. If you're confused here, it goes back to the ROM section of this video, and it's all explained in my ROMs and BIOS video that's linked in the description. After you import your BIOS file, select it and click Next. Now we need to select our PS2 ROM directory, so go ahead and do that. Click Next, then Finish. Let it scan your PS2 games. Once it's done, head to Settings top left, then App Settings, scroll down and you can enable frame rate and monitoring here if you'd like. Now head to Graphics, and I'm going to pause here again. PS2, out of all of the systems on this, is going to require game-by-game tweaks. So OpenGL is enabled here as default. You might have better luck with Vulkan in some games, and the same goes for upscaling. If you watched my PS2 showcase video, I showed Vulkan 2x and I enabled threaded presentation, which is here in the graphics tab. But some games still didn't work. So again, use the compatibility spreadsheet to see what works best, and go from there. If you scroll all the way to the right, you can enable retro achievements, head back and settings again, and this time go to controller settings. In the touchscreen tab, set controller view to none, and this removes on-screen controls. Scroll down and you can enable game vibration if you'd like. Head to controller port 1 and now map your controls for PlayStation 2. When you're done, scroll over to hotkeys and feel free to map fast forward if you'd like. Head back to the main screen and jump into a game. If you push back on the Retroid bottom left, it opens the Aether menu, and you can load state, save state, and do more. Now, if you click the circled eye top right, you can actually do per game settings here. If you click the settings cog top right, you can do general settings that affects everything. Last thing, head to the Play Store, search for Aether SX2, click the dots top right, and disable auto update. If you don't have that option, you can skip this step. We're done with Aether SX2. Next up, let's do Nintendo DS, and I'm actually going to be using MelonDS here instead of Drastic. If you prefer Drastic, I'll leave a link in the description to a video that shows that instead. I think MelonDS is just better personally nowadays, but it's your choice. Head to the Play Store and search for MelonDS and install it. Click Set ROM Directory and search for your Nintendo DS ROM folder. It should all populate, then click the three dots top right, and now head to Save Files. And if you don't want your saves to be in the same folder as your ROMs, you can change that here to wherever you want. Next, head to Input and disable Show Soft Input to remove all the on-screen controls. Then select Key Mapping and Map buttons for Nintendo DS. I put Fast Forward as R2 and Swap Screen as L2. Head back and you can enable retro achievements here if you'd like. Jump into a game, and if you push the back button on the bottom left of the Retroid, you can get the MelonDS menu here as well. That's it for MelonDS, let's move on. Next up is PSP, and we'll be using PPSSPP from the Play Store. So go ahead and install it and then open it. Give it permissions, leave the first option selected and then click OK. Now create a folder here on the internal or wherever you'd like and just call it PPSSPP and use that folder, then click OK. Now you can click the SD button to browse to your PSP ROMs if they're on the SD card, and you can just show them here if you'd like. Otherwise, click Settings on the right, and for PSP you can choose 3x resolution. Now click Controls on the left and disable on-screen touch controls. Then click Control Mapping. Clear all, and now just map for PSP. I personally set speed toggle to R2. Head back to the game screen and just open a game. And if you click the back button on the bottom left, it'll open the PPSSPP menu for you. That's going to be it for PPSSPP. Next up is Nintendo 64 with M64Plus FZ, and I highly suggest that you do the Pro version, which I think was like $5. You can get this from the Play Store, otherwise if you really don't want to pay, just use the free version. Install it and open it and grant permissions. Now click the plus icon bottom right and choose Select Folder and navigate to your N64 ROMs folder. Let it populate, it might take you some time. When it's done, click the lines top left and head to Settings, display, and you could set this higher to something like 960 by 720 if you'd like. You might have to change this for some games though, so just keep that in mind. Scroll down to Profiles and select Controller. Click the new icon in the top right and name it anything. I chose Retroid. Click OK and now map your controller for an N64. This is going to suck a little bit. I use the right stick for the C buttons, but some games you're going to want to change that around. So you may want to create multiple controller profiles with different mappings that you like. Head back when you're done and click Select Profiles. Change Controller 1 profile to the one you just created. Go ahead and open a game. You'll see the on-screen controls for 5 seconds and then they disappear. If you push the back button bottom left, it opens the menu. That's it for M64Plus FZ. And now we come to the fun part of the video, and that's RetroArch, Yuzu, Citra, and Vita 3K. These apps all share one thing in common. They're super annoying to just keep up to date, since none of their best versions are on the Play Store. Thankfully, there's an app called Obtainium, which is awesome and it keeps these up to date. So let's head to the Obtainium GitHub page, which you can find via Google, go to the Releases section, and grab the latest release from the Assets dropdown. You can grab the one that just says app-release.apk. Go ahead and install it and then open it. Allow notifications, and then click Add App on the bottom. Now let's do Yuzu first. Head back to Google and type in Yuzu Android GitHub in the search and click the first result. Click the 3 dots on the top right, Share, and copy the link. Head back to Obtainium and paste it into the source URL spot. Then click Add to the right and leave everything else as default. When it's done, click Install on the bottom, and you have to allow unknown apps again, and it's going to install Yuzu for you. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for Citra next. Head to Google and search for Citra Canary GitHub. Do the same thing and go to Share, copy link, and head back to Obtainium and add app, paste the link, and click Add. Go ahead and click Install after. Do the exact same thing for Vita 3K again. So Google Vita 3K Android GitHub, copy the link, and add app, and install it. Now RetroArch is a bit different. Google RetroArch BuildBot Android, and just make sure the link looks like mine on screen. Copy and paste that into the same first line like the others, but then scroll down and under Custom APK Link Filter, type in RetroArch_AArch64.apk with the same capitalizations and everything. It has to match. Then go ahead and add app and install. Alright, so let's start with Yuzu first. Open Yuzu from your apps and get started, grant permissions, and now we come to select keys. Unfortunately, my ROMs and BIOS video doesn't cover this or anything Switch related, as I just literally can't as much as I want to. You need prod keys for this, and this is just something that I can't help you with. Maybe the ROM subreddit on Reddit can help you if you want to check. For Add Games, select your Switch Games folder. Continue, and now you should see your games populate on screen. When it's done, click the settings top left. Scroll to Manage Yuzu Data and install firmware. Install the Switch firmware, which is just again something I can't share. Go back and open up a game. If you hit the back button bottom left, it opens the menu, go to Overlay Options, Toggle Controls, and toggle all to remove on-screen controls. That's it for Yuzu. Next up is Citra. Open the Citra app from your app screen. Get started, grant permissions, select user folder, and create a new folder called Citra. I just do this on the internal storage, and I use that folder. And now select your 3DS games folder. Continue and your game should populate. Click the three dots top left, Settings, then Gamepad, and now map your controls for 3DS. I use Swap Screen on L3. Head back and into Graphics. Change OpenGLES to Vulkan. And then enable Asynchronous Shader Compilation. You can change the internal resolution to 3x if you'd like, but you might have to change it for some games. Head back and let's open a game. Click the back button on the Retroid, then Overlay Options, and uncheck Show Overlay to remove on-screen controls. That's it for Citra. Next up is Vita 3K. Open the Vita 3K app from your app screen. Select the language, and now we need to download some files. Click Download Firmware, it'll open a page, and scroll to Download Update. And I pushed and held and opened a new tab, and downloaded the file. Head back to Vita 3K and click Install Firmware File. Navigate to the file we just downloaded, it should just be right there, and click it. Let it install. Now click Download Font Package. It should download automatically. Head back and click Install Firmware File, and select that new one now. Click OK, and then Next. And I screwed up this next part, but just close this window via the close button or the X top right. It just wasn't working for me. But you want to create a user, and you can name it whatever you like, then just click that user to log in. You're going to see a PSP looking screen. Go to Controls at the top, then Overlay, and uncheck Show Gamepad Overlay to remove the on-screen controls. Go to File, and this is where you install your games. Mine are zipped, so I'm going to install the zip. Navigate to my Vita ROMs directory and click the game. Once that's done, you can go ahead and click the game to open it, then the center part to launch it. When I'm in a game, I swipe up from the bottom and I hit the back button to exit. That's it for Vita 3K. The last emulator on our list is RetroArch, which basically you'll use for Dreamcast, PS1, Saturn, and every other system before those. Open the RetroArch app from the app screen, grant permissions, and then head to Online Updater. And you can use the B button to select for now. Then Core Downloader, and now you want to download the cores for the system that you want. So for me, I have Final Burn Neo for arcade, Gambate for Game Boy, MGBA for Game Boy Advance, Messen for NES, SNES 9X for SNES, Flycast for Dreamcast, Genesis Plus GX for Sega, Beetle Saturn for Saturn, and Swan Station for PlayStation 1. If you have other systems I don't have, then feel free to add them if you'd like. Back out by pushing A when you're done. Then A again, and use the D-pad to go right to User Interface. Then go to On-Screen Display, On-Screen Overlay, and uncheck Display Overlay to remove the on-screen controls. Back out, and this time go to Input, and then RetroPad Binds. Then Port 1 Controls. Now go ahead and map all of your controls here all the way up to Gun Trigger. Head back and back, then to Menu Controls, and uncheck Swap OK and Cancel. Now A should be Select and B should be Back. Back again and head to Hotkeys. For Hotkey Enable, I'm going to use Select, but another good one is L3. For Menu Toggle, I choose X. This means that when I push Select and X, it opens the RetroArch menu in Game. To exit games, for Quit, I choose Start. Fast Forward Toggle is R2. Load State is L1. Save State is R1. And Show FPS is A. Head back, scroll down to confirm Quit, and uncheck it. This makes it so you don't have to do Start and Select twice to exit a game. Back out and head to Saving. Scroll down, and if you want to auto-save state when exiting a game and auto-load state when loading a game, check these two options. Otherwise, if you don't want that, you can ignore them. Back out and head to Achievements. And you can set up retro achievements here if you want. If you do, I suggest disabling hardcore mode. Lastly, if you back out and head to directory, you can see where things are saved, or where they go. For example, you're going to want to put your BIOS files for PlayStation 1 especially in the RetroArch/system folder on your internal storage. Don't skip this step, especially for PlayStation 1. Use your D-pad to navigate to home, or click the home icon on the right, scroll down to configuration file, and click Save Current Configuration. That's it for RetroArch. Last thing on the list is a front end, and we'll be using Daijisho. I'll leave a more in-depth guide to Daijisho in my description, but here's a quick one. Install Daijisho from the Play Store and then open it. Grant permissions, and now click Download Platforms. Check any platform for any games that you have. So Dreamcast, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, and so on and so forth. Click Import when you're done. You now have this fancy screen with all of your platforms. Let's head to Settings at the top, then Library, and scroll down and disable player warnings. Head back to Platforms, and now for any platform that you have, you're going to need to click the Paths button, and then Add More, and navigate to that platform's ROM directory, and then add it. Then click Sync, and you'll start to see it analyzing all of your games and adding them and box art and all of that. Now, we have to tell Daijisho what emulator to use for this platform. So click the pencil icon on the right and double check the player settings. The Dreamcast one that I have here just happens to be correct for this, but 99% of the issues launching games from Daijisho is because you're pointing it to the wrong emulator, so always double check this for every platform. There are also some platforms that just won't work from Daijisho, and I talk about that in my other video. Last step, let's set Daijisho to be the home app, so when you push the home button twice, it brings you to it. Or when you start up the device, it launches right to it. Head to Settings, System Settings, Apps, Default Apps, and change Home App to Daijisho. That's it, you're done. And you're also done with this guide. I'm tired of talking, my mouth is dry, and I hope this helped set you up for everything that you need for this device. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.